There were three cards that were dealt to me. The cards were my father, my looks or the lack of it, my intellect or the lack of it. If you were playing a card game, what would you do? You would look at your hand and you'd either pack up saying this hand's not good enough, or you'll bluff your way through, which is what I do sometimes, or you'd say, you know what, good or bad doesn't matter, I'll wait for the cards to be dealt out on the table and I'll pick the ones and change my hand as it goes. Those are one of the things that we do. We play our game of life like that. We get dealt cards, our looks, our parents, our education, we get all of those and we choose to play them in either one of those ways or in all of those ways. But you know what? Most of us, while this is being played out, there is an unknown dynamic that comes into place. It starts in the periphery, but slowly starts taking over. What happens when you're playing a game of cards? Some of us start believing that the hand that's being dealt to us is not good enough. And therefore, what do? We said, can I change the place where I'm sitting? This is not good enough, right? Or we say, you know what? If my wife deals the cards, my hand is always good. Sometimes if my neighbor's wife deals the cards, my hand's always good, right? I have a very silly habit. Every time I need a joker desperately when you're playing rummy, I'll call my son and say, please pick the card because I'm hoping that I'll pick a joker. It's as silly as it gets. This is what I call the Ireland syndrome. When we start getting distracted, we fall into the Ireland syndrome trap. Let me take a while, because if you Google, you will not find Ireland syndrome to explain this through a story. This was 2011. My son Agastya, who at that time was 7 years old, and I were watching the World Cup cricket match in Bangalore. India was playing Ireland, and what can I say? India being India was playing badly against Ireland. A match that could have been easily won looked like was going away. I looked at my son. This was his first competitive match that he was watching in a stadium. He looks at me and he says, Appa, I hate Ireland. And I look at him and say, why do you hate Ireland, Agastya? India is losing. He said, Appa, Ireland is playing well and India is losing. So, you know, when you look back, that is what most of us do. And that is when the Ireland syndrome came in place. When we start blaming others for our failures, when we start deflecting instead of reflecting, that is when you fall to the Ireland syndrome trap. I fell to this trap to myself. My father was my Ireland. You know, my father in his all self was a wonderful person. Despite his Dravidian pride, he sent me for Hindi classes. He sent me for typing classes. Some of you young guys won't get it. When we were growing up, every self-respecting middle-class person went for typing or shorthand classes because at least you'll get a PS job. Each push of his made him from a small Ireland to a large continent until the breaking point happened. I did my 12th, brilliant results, even if I say so myself. I received a call from my dream college saying, you've been waitlisted, R.Elango. If you paid 10,000 rupees, we'll keep you in the waitlist. The villain wasn't far away. He said, no, I can't pay 10,000 rupees. You're not going to do it. Then worse, he says, I cannot pay 100 rupees to allow you to apply for another dream college that I wanted to apply. Something snapped within. I said, to hell with you, Dad. I'm going to do what I want. I spurned every engineering college offer that came after that and did what no self-respecting South Indian middle-class citizen will do. Spurned engineering and took hotel management. My mom was flabbergasted. She said, "Oh my God, this is my son's 7-year shani in the horoscope that is playing out. What do I do?" My grandmother's biggest worry was, "Ayo, who will give you a girl now? Nobody will marry a waiter." Despite all this nonsense, things worked out well. I got a great job, made some decent money, did marry a very pretty girl, and my game of life was playing out. But what I didn't realize is that was the periphery. In my Ireland taking over, in my urgency to spite my own father, had bundled my dreams and aspirations as I was moving on. The drama did come to an end, but it did come to an end with another drama. Things were working well. I had a pretty wife, an adorable son, and just when we thought nothing could go wrong, a chance X-ray detected a growth in the lung, and the worst came true, and they said, "R.Elango, you could be having lung cancer." Everything came crashing down around us. I'll tell you, for you at that stage, to school, to be married, for your wife to be around for your wife and you not be, is, as much as I sounded to be dramatic, is really, really terrible. A lot of tears happened, and I remember, but now when we laugh about it, I kid with my wife that the first thing that I remembered is I said, "Oh, I'm going to lose my hair." I did eventually lose my hair, until somebody reminded that you may not be long enough to lose the hair. And then I said, "Oh my God, I got to give my bank password to my wife." Eventually things did work out okay. We figured out that it was not the dreaded C word, but I had an autoimmune disorder. Within 2 weeks, this whole death drama died out, but there's one thing that stayed back. I asked myself the question, if the death drama had played out, what would my son remember me for? Would he remember me for the father who hated his father? Would he remember me for a successful HR executive that hired people that quit the company he hired by the time he got to first grade? What will he remember by? My whole Ireland came crashing down, and surprise, surprise, when I had my conversation with my father, he did not even know I was walking around with this spiteful cross around me. He explained it to me saying, "R.Elango, do you know when you were growing up that 10,000 rupees we couldn't have afforded? That's the reason I didn't pay for it. And by the way, the school you wanted to go to, I heard the boys there did drugs, and I knew you'd get into trouble. I wanted you to go to an engineering college because that wouldn't have stretched our finances, would have kept you away from harm's way, and you would have still got the education you wanted." It was a relief, but my first question is, why the hell didn't we have this conversation earlier? And the other thing that I remember is the minute this whole Ireland stuff went away, I felt this big void. It almost felt like, oh, now I don't have my father to hate. What do I do? There was this big gap. I did fill it up with somebody else later, but that's another story for some other time. While this father card was playing out, there was another card that was playing out for me, which is my looks. This is my pre-lung cancer scare days. When I was in my early 20s, suddenly my left eye had red blotches. So I took whatever the savings that I had, went to the best eye hospital, especially actually in Chennai, and where a course of steroids would have taken the inflammation away, my eye was operated on not once but twice, and I lost my left eyesight. And before you guys all say, "Oh my God, I was so sad," you get two of everything for a reason. I swung by, but the corollary of that is if you look hard in my behind my specs, you will see that I developed a lazy eye and I have a squint, and that can be the biggest embarrassment that can happen to you. For no fault of mine, for an incompetent, foolish doctor, now I had looks that I wasn't too comfortable with. I had a choice to make that incompetent doctor my Ireland, but I said, you know what, I'm not going to give him that credit. I will move on. And instead, I said, let me play the card the way I tell other people to play it out. And now I joke that when I ask a room full of people questions, everybody thinks that I ask them the question because I can look at both sides of the room. You know, make a joke of it and move on. I can share with you many, many, many such stories. But let me pause here because the focus, I want to save some for another session. Hopefully you guys will invite me. The focus here is not on my stories. I played round one. I played it well. I'm very happy. I have no regrets. The hand for round two is being played out already. I have the cards. I love some of the cards. I hate some of the cards, but I will play it out. A lot of the remnants, there is a hangover from round one. I still have a lesion in my brain. My doctor still tells me that there are chances that I'll use, that this is systemic and I'll lose the other right eye. But that's not going to become my Ireland. I'm going to move on, play the hand that's been dealt out to me, and play it out well. Because at the end of the day, you have a set of cards. You can either complain about it or play it out well and make the best out of what you can. I have met many people. I think the young girl Lavanya that we saw today, she was dealt a set of cards. I couldn't have met somebody more joyful and energetic than she was. I have met, after I started saying the story, daughters that have been abused by their own fathers, children that have been abandoned by their parents, employees that have had terrible bosses who've nearly killed their careers, but each of them have chosen to play the cards. I'm ready to play round two. Are you ready to play round two? Are you ready to say, are you ready to go underground, or like in our side of the world, be consigned to the fire with no regrets, saying, I've played the cards well? Let me leave that with you folks, and with one last gift to each one of you. One of the things that my son does, and as you can see, my son's very dear to me. Last night he said, hey Appa, you're going for a wonderful session tomorrow, I heard. I said, yes, Agastya. He said, are you nervous? I said, yeah, a little nervous. So just before going to sleep, he says, you will leave before I leave. I've left 1,000,000 kisses in your pockets. Every time you feel sad, every time you miss me, you're anxious, take one kiss and you will feel better. So what I am going to do is take those kisses out, just keep one for myself on the way back and pass it to all of you guys. Hopefully the good wishes will stay with you. Thank you very much.